in my current role, I look after the Evidence Data and Knowledge Group back at the Ministry of Education. And we have a whole lot of data. We have truckloads of data. You probably at some point would have interacted with the group. So we look after things like enroll and a whole range of things. And my mission basically is to take the data and give it back to you in a way that you might be able to understand it. The strange career path, it's not that strange actually if you're in my shoes. I'm a career public servant, okay? But my most formative years really were in defence. So I was a serving soldier, and I trained in the intelligence corps, trained and worked in the intelligence corps. And the motto for the intelligence corps is knowledge gives strength to the arm. And so my whole career really, and my job now, is basically taking various bits of information and trying to make sense of it. And so that's what I've been doing. So my time with you today basically is to talk to you a little bit about data. And I've put it in a story format, and I'm attempting to kind of show you how I begin to look at data, and hopefully you'll be able to walk out with some insight, one into what the system looks like, what the system in education looks like, but also in terms of how you might begin to look at data. Most people are not mathematicians and statisticians. That's my kind of forte. But you don't need to be a mathematician or statistician to really get to grips with data. And when I talk about data, I mean data from a range of perspectives. So it can be empirical data, but it can be qualitative data, it can be absolutely anything. Data surrounds us. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you through the picture of the education system, what it looks like, and give you some insight into that. So, if I just click, oh yeah, all right. So we had this stuff ingrained in our brain, right? You'll end up with this slide. But these are kind of the fundamentals of the intelligence world. And you probably wouldn't expect to come to an education conference and talk much about intelligence. But that's what teachers are doing, of course, every day. They're making intelligence. They're trying to work out actually what's going on. And, you know, we are seriously poorly wired to be able to deal effectively with the stuff that surrounds us. When I walk into a classroom, what I see in a classroom is just masses of data. You know, there's masses of information all on the walls. And trying to make sense of that is very hard. And there's a great deal of uncertainty. But I'm quite comfortable with uncertainty. We can talk about national standards and overall teacher judgments. But generally, if you can be comfortable with a degree of uncertainty, and if you can be comfortable with your judgments, then you tend to be quite a good analyst. And most teachers are quite good at that. Also, in order to do that, you've got to be aware of your biases. Some of the biases will come out in this presentation. You'll know about the biases that we have in the education system. And our biases cloud our judgment. Our biases cloud the things that we do. And as teachers and professionals, we need to be very, very cognizant of the biases that we have in our head. Because actually the actions, you know, what the biases we have in our head will ultimately determine what we do. That could affect people. So we need to be aware of that. But actually there are tools and techniques, there are things out there that we can use that will make us aware of our biases. So it'll make us make sense of some of that uncertainty, and it'll give us a sense of actually what our biases are. Some of the things obviously in the education world are things like PAT tests and ES. So they give us an independent check on what we think is really going on. But they're not foolproof, of course. So we're going to have about just under an hour of mathematics. And so you'll be pleased about that. But, you know, it'll be fine. Often I have to convince people of the value of education. I won't have to convince you, but I'm going to give you some insight into why it's really important to be educated. And people have found these slides interesting. They've shared them with parents, right? So, let's just get to the point of it.
In the next room won't allow. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Rather than sit in silence for an hour and
yeah, no worries at all. Is that okay now? No. What's the little red dot? The red dot's not coming on. Anyway. Okay. So this is median weekly income, and this is just over time. This is a man here. It's a bit of a male theme. I'm sorry about this. So this is a man, and how much they earn what their median weekly income is over time. So if you are a male, this is a male that has a tertiary degree or higher, you're going to earn just over $1,000 a week, roughly, if you've got a degree. This is a male without a degree, so they're earning about $500 a week. So if you are qualified, you earn more money. If you earn more money, you have more choice. It's kind of a no-brainer. I've used this with quite a lot of students as well. Students, this comes as a bit of a surprise to students, the actual difference between being educated and not educated. It's certainly inspired my daughter, which is quite good. The other thing is, if you are tertiary qualified and you're a man, you can expect to live 8 years longer. If you're tertiary qualified and a man and you're married, you will live longer still. That is not the case if you're a woman. So marriage is not that good for women in terms of increased life expectancy. And also there are strong relationships between things like health indicators and education. All right, I'll just go back. Okay. So we've also been looking at education, and we know that not being educated costs a lot. So if you walk out of education and you have got a qualification, you've got more of a chance to end up on the benefit or in the correction system without quals. And we're able to now cost that, so that actually how much does it cost? So we've been matching data sets, and I'm going to return to this at the end of the presentation. But we've been matching data sets across education and MSD and corrections, and we've been following real live people through education and through into the benefit system and through into corrections, okay? And we've been able to cost the cost of not getting education. Now, bear with me, right? These are real people that we've tracked. They were born, I think, in 1989. So they're born in 1989. This is them growing up in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, so on and so forth. They grew up. And this is the group that got no quals: NCA level 1, NCA level 2, NCA level 3, level 4, and so on and so forth. This is the cost in millions that they have cost us in any one year. So of these people that didn't get any qualifications at all, right, in main benefit costs and corrections costs, they cost in 2013 about $80 million. So just in benefit costs is about $40 million. So of the people born in 1989 that walked out of school without any qualifications at all, we have paid to them in benefits and through corrections costs $80 million. Does that make sense? A lot of money, hey? So, and what happens is once they hit the $80 million cost, that profile remains for pretty much the rest of their life. And of course, that's just one, like 1989 born cohort, they weren't particularly special. That's the profile we get from every year. So every year, we've got this forward liability cost kind of hemorrhaging out of our education system that's costing $80 million. So to not get an education, is incredibly expensive. And so we've got the Minister of Finance. We use this information to talk to the Minister of Finance around budget time. And the education budget hasn't decreased over the last few years, because of course we're arguing the case that $1 spent in education is worth probably 10, 15, 20 in MSD or in corrections costs. So of the big spenders across government, the main spenders in government are education, health and MSD. So we take up about 2/3 of the government budget completely, and the remaining third is covered by about 51 agencies, which includes justice, corrections and police. So we've maintained investment in education on the basis that if you don't invest in education, you're facing great long-term forward liability. So it's really important on a number of levels. What I'm going to do now is I've used the BPS targets as a better public service target. So when this government came in, they set some targets. We have some of them. We have 3 of them in education. And I'm going to use it just as an enabling framework to paint the picture for you of educational achievement and what it looks like. And as I've put this picture together for you, I've drawn on a number of sources, and you'll see bits and pieces of the data that you'll be familiar with in this presentation. But I'm not talking about it because it happens to be the government's target. I'm just using these because it gives you a sense of a pathway from ECE into primary, through into secondary, up into age 18. So we're going to take that journey now, and I'm going to tell you what it looks like. Okay, there are the BPS targets. Right, first off, who are we talking about? So we've got 53,000 teachers in 2,500 schools, 767 students, so 7,000 students, and we've got 200 students going to ECE. On any one day, we've got about 300 students having their first day at school. We can cut this data regionally by territorial authority. We can do it by your school. So if you're at a primary school, we can work at your feeder schools. You'll know them anyway. But what we're able to do is we are able to give you your own community pathway. We can give you your own pipeline. What does it look like? So for me, I live in Upper Hutt. So what does it look like for children living in Upper Hutt? What's their pathway look like? So we're able to do that for you on the basis of the data that's back in the office. So and we can cut it different ways. So when we look just at Catholic schools, right, we've got about 4,500 teachers, there's about 65,000 students, 240 Catholic schools, 24,000 kids going to ECE, and in any one Catholic school in any one day, we've got about 25 new entrants. Yeah. What does it look like in terms of ECE? So the goal for early childhood, the government goal for early childhood is for 98% of our population having been to early childhood before they start school. Now, I don't particularly like this target because it's got nothing to do with quality or, you know, and actually there's nothing about how much early childhood have you had over how much, you know, over how long. But I've got to say, it's really, really focused the mind. And we have got to the point where we've nearly got the whole population going to early childhood education. It's a really important point. You know, most of our kids are going to ECE. And incidentally, the Minister of Finance, of course, is through our Minister funding that to over $1 billion worth. So back in December 2009, we had 94% of the population going to ECE. And now we're up to about 96.1% of the population going to ECE. In any one year, so in, you know, year 1, year 2, year 3, so on and so forth, there are about 60,000 students. So what we're saying there is most of those 60,000 students that turn up in any one year have gone to ECE. If we wanted to hit the target today, we would need an additional 1,148 students going to ECE. If we wanted to hit it equitably, which we do, so 98% Māori, 98% Pacifica going to ECE, we would need 685 Māori students and 571 Pacifica students. This is tiny, tiny numbers, right? So we've got to a point now where we're literally going into the most vulnerable communities and doing whatever we can to enable those students to go into ECE, because then it means at least we've got them there. And to get to a point where we need just 685 Māori students going to ECE is phenomenal. Because what we're starting to do is we're starting to address this equity gap. We've never been able to address it before. And as I go through the presentation, you'll start to see how we're making great inroads in terms of the inequity that we're seeing in the system. So just imagine it, of the 60,000 kids in that one cohort roughly, just 1,100 more in ECE. Then we can move on to quality, you know, I mean we could do that now, but then it'll be about actually what does it look like, what are they getting? I mean it was only Monday I think there was something in the media, and it keeps bubbling up all the time about what are the expectations in early childhood education, what are the things that we need kids to be coming into school knowing. And we hear, you know, time and time again from teachers that there's an oral language problem, kids are, you know, they're not getting the basics, it's getting worse, blah, blah, blah. We've now got them in there, we need to address them. So again, we can break it down by different cuts. So if we just looked at the, feeder ECEs into Catholic schools, you can see that in March 2016. So we reckon that you'll get to about 97.6% of your learners having gone to ECE. We're about that now. We're not seeing any more shift. So what would that mean? So how many more kids do you need in terms of Catholic schools? How many more kids do you need to hit the target, right? Going to ECE? 19. That's it. Becomes incredibly doable. And if you wanted to hit it equitably, and of course Pacifica is a big thing for Catholic schooling, you need an additional 29% of the kids. So somewhere in your communities, there are Pacifica families that are not going to ECE, which is fine, it's their choice. But actually, there may be some that do want to go to ECE, and there just might not be provision. Anyway, the point is, it breaks down into quite manageable numbers. And I've just put it on a graph so you can kind of see what it looks like. So what I want you to notice here is the kind of downwardy slope. So this is how many you used to need, and this is how many you need now. So something has been actively happening in this population for us to have got that kind of graph. This hasn't happened by chance. It's just not a population phenomenon. It's actually something's been going on. And what's been going on is people literally, there's been an early childhood task force of people who've literally been trying to get behind these families to get into ECE. Right, so what happens when they go to primary? So what we see, these are national standards data, and so these are the overall teacher judgments that are sent into us, and we can talk about whether we believe in things. But what we see is when we get teachers, overall teacher judgments, we see, I might go back so you don't look right. So what we see is, we see teachers' overall teacher judgments mirroring exactly what we see in other big studies, so like national monitoring, TIMS, girls. It tells us actually the same thing. The benefit of the national standards data is it tells us information from years 1 to 8 right through in reading, writing, mathematics. Whereas if it was NEMP and TIMS and PILS, we just have cohort data and by particular content areas. So it tells us that as a country we're good at reading, so it goes reading, mathematics, writing. It shows us the spread of inequity, and it also shows us kind of the amount of inequity. I'll talk about that a bit more. But the things that teachers tend to disagree on are levels of belowness and levels of aboveness. So generally a teacher, and I say generally a teacher can tell you if a child is achieving at curriculum expectations, right? Roughly. But where they argue is levels of belowness. So whether this child is below or well below. And that's where we get a lot of kind of variability in that data. And there are good reasons for that variability. Different teachers in different schools have different expectations. They do. We may have one curriculum, but actually the way teachers articulate the curriculum and understand the curriculum is very different depending on the school you are in. And it could be not necessarily school type, but school by school and also school type. How many times have you had the debate where the secondary teachers are saying, well, actually, that's not curriculum level 5, and the intermediate teachers are saying, that's not what I expect at curriculum level 4. There's great dissonance in terms of expectations, and we kind of always knew that. But there is dissonance in particular aspects of the curriculum, and I'll show you. 3 things from this graph that I want you to just draw your attention to. So blue is reading, red is maths, green is writing, and this is after 1 year all the way up to the end of year 8. The first thing I want you to notice is the slopey line. So what's going on in our schools, and this is confirmed with things like PATs and ESTL, and again the international studies, this is an incredibly serious issue, and this is probably one of the most serious issues that we are facing in education at the moment. Children go into school and they make strong growth and progress in years 1 to 4. And generally, most children make a year's progress in a year, in years 1 to 4. But by about year 5, we have more and more students not meeting curriculum expectations. By about year 5, all the way through. And fewer and fewer children are meeting the curriculum expectations. And more and more children are not getting a year's worth of learning in a year. And so we get this great big kind of spread. And so by the time, in terms of the highest performers and the lowest performers, by the time a child gets to year 8, it's not unlikely necessarily that they will be between 3 to 5 years behind the achievement that they are expected to be at according to the curriculum level. And teachers are often faced, we see in the data, with a kind of spread of learning, if you like, of 5 years. So any one teacher could be faced with 30 kids, and the spectrum of growth, if you like, or achievement will be 5 years, a span of 5 years growth and progress. It kicks in at about year 4 and just gets worse and worse. So if you can imagine, and I'll talk a bit about risk later on, but we've got these kids that are coming into schooling, they're generally doing well, and New Zealand has this phenomenon whereby we don't tend to push back on risk factors as well as other countries. So we've got kids coming into school and got a whole lot of risk factors that they're coming in with. Education begins to push against those risk factors in years 1 to 4, and then actually education starts to lose its grip on being able to equip those kids with the foundation skills that they will need going into college. The net result is students go from year 8 to year 9. There is very little growth and progress in the system at all between years 8 and year 9. And of the students that have gone into year 9 that don't have those foundation skills, they generally do one of two things. This is quite a bleak picture, but they generally do one of two things. They either, for whatever reason, see incredible growth and progress at year 10, and they start to pick up and accelerate, or they try and leave the system. So we've got about 10,000 kind of leaving age children, students, leaving school in any 1 year. And of those 10,000, the majority of them wouldn't have got the foundation skills. And by year 8, they certainly would be in quite a lot of trouble. So we know that in the system quite early on. So know that first. That's the first take home. Second thing is, this after the end of year 1, this is reading. So these are the open teacher judgments that are made, and teachers are telling us actually that they don't have as many students meeting the curriculum expectation after 1 year of teaching. Now, for me, the question is, if we've invested $1 billion into early childhood education, why have we got a profile like that? So what I would be looking at is, what's the reach back into ECE? What are the things that need to be going on in ECE in order to equip these kids to be able to learn and to get to the expected curriculum level after the end, after year 1. See what happens at year 2 with these kids though. We've got 80% of the students achieving at the expected curriculum level after 2 years. So the kids, the teachers are picking them up and they're progressing.
I could actually tell you why that is. The standard is too high.
Yeah, we could say that. Hey, so you could, the standard's too high. And I'm really happy. I think as a profession we should open up that debate. I think we should.
It's also, if your support programs for our kids at risk before the age of 7, it needs to be put in place at the year 5 again.
Yeah.
So we put this support out in the early years for kids at risk of failing, so we do recovery programs.
Yes.
Nothing again at year 5 when it plateaus off.
Yes, I agree.
We've got to keep the accelerated progress throughout with good support systems.
Yeah.
So money needs to go into learner support across schools.
Yeah, and I totally agree. So these are the things so this type of information is being used by us in order to leverage the budget. That is exactly what's happening. And the curriculum thing, we can have a debate about the curriculum. Are the curriculum expectations too high? Let me tell you about the third point on this chart, right? So you would have heard about the maths reports that went out recently. Look at this. So maths is red, right? So red, about 7%. Look at the end of year 8 and the end of year 7. End of year 7 and year 8, right? What happens in mathematics, and we see it in these are the teacher judgments, right? These are overall teacher judgments, national standards judgments that nobody believes. But here you have, because that's the rhetoric, right? We don't believe the data. But here you have a big drop at years 7 and 8, which is an unusual drop, but we see this drop in other studies. And what's going on here, because we've delved into this with other work, is that there are two schools of thought. You'll know this. Two kind of ways of understanding mathematics. One is data, number, and statistics, and one is space, shape, form, algebra. So at year 7 and 8, that's when space, shape, form, algebra really, really kicks in, right? And what we're getting a sense of is, compared to the OECD, we have an incredibly strong profile in number, data, and statistics. Like, we are stand out in the OECD statistics in terms of number, data, and statistics. But we also stand out in things like space, shape, geometry, uncertainty, because we are seriously the poor cousins behind everybody else in the OECD. So what I think is going on there is that teachers generally are not teaching the space, shape, geometry, and that kind of thing at that end. We see it go into the secondary as well, where lots of children are funneled into statistics rather than mathematics. And when we looked at the PISA results, and there were other things that we looked at, what we found was, and in national monitoring, we found that students were being asked to answer questions about particular things, concepts in mathematics, and they weren't doing particularly well, but they were also reporting that they'd never been exposed to those particular concepts. Alongside that, we have teachers that are also telling us that they're not particularly confident in those areas. So here we have a curriculum that has a high expectation in terms of space, shape, geometry, and all those things. We have a workforce that is probably not completely as a whole comfortable with teaching those things, and we have students reporting that they are not being taught those things. Lo and behold, we have the maths performance that we have. So of that slide, 3 things in the system: the dip in growth from year 5 onwards, the reading at year 1, and the maths issue that starts to kick in at year 7 and 8. All right, that's your profile. You guys look higher than everybody else. Like, you know, you've got to ask first of all, do we believe it? And the other thing is with the National Standards Monitoring Report, we ask principals, do they believe their overall teacher judgments? And the principals say yes. You know, it's the school down the road. You can have them, yeah. Yes, you can. I'll find out how to email them out to you, and I'll make sure that you get them. So, I mean, I actually do believe the national standards results because at a macro level, it generally matches all the other studies that we have. But there are nuances in there, like maths. You know, maths would be a bit dodgy, and the well belows and belows. Like there are parts that we need to sharpen up on. I mean, the answer actually is PACT, and I know that's highly critical, but PACT is a fantastic tool. When teachers have been using PACT, and all it does is it just basically unpacks the content in reading, writing, mathematics. And the most unusual thing I felt, the thing that surprised me the most, was when teachers went into PACT and they started to use it. They really loved it, but they loved it because it gave them the breadth of the content areas, and they didn't necessarily know about the breadth of all the strands, and they didn't know the level of difficulty in each strand. So it gave them some real concrete kind of exemplars as to what you would be teaching, say, in mathematics and when. Anyway, they like it.
You talked about the well below divide, and then that divide with that, but I reckon the biggest concern is the above. It seems like national standards have brought a total reinvention of the bell curve, the simplistic level.
Yeah, see, so maybe I haven't answered your question. So
I just, you know, bell curve, I think that's been so well researched, we can trust it.
yeah.
But all of a sudden, New Zealand's achievement profile, which is what I see as we've got a massive increase in the number of people at the top end of the curve as displayed by national standards data on the above field.
Yeah. So I suppose there's a kind of philosophy there, isn't there? So the thing about national standards is I liken it to taking a driving test. So before, I went to school in England, and I sat my A-levels, right? And so when I sat my A-levels, regardless of what my performance was, there were only a certain amount of people, obviously, that could have particular grades, you know, because they would put in cut points. So they would get everybody that sat, you know, I don't know, English A-level or whatever, they would get the list of grades, and they would go, right, that's from there upwards is A, from there upwards is B, C, blah, blah, blah. So my grade, my performance, was largely determined by everybody else's performance, right? It's a bit like decile ratings, yeah? It's you relative to everybody else. It's not you and your particular performance and circumstances. The national standards doesn't use those cut points, and it doesn't use the normal distribution, right? The national standards is basically about, it's like a driving test type thing. Everybody can pass their driving test, you know? So we want everybody to be meeting the expectations in the curriculum. We don't want a bell curve in the curriculum. We want everybody to be meeting that. The trouble is, people walk around with bell curves in their head. And so teachers are more likely to have a bell curve in their head and try and rank order their class than they will look at the curriculum objectives and rank each person, each student against those objectives. We're moving more and more towards that, but still teachers do have this implicit bell curve. So you know I started this by saying, be careful of your assumptions. So teachers need to be really careful about they're not doing that. But you're right, we do see a bell curve. But it's kind of a skewed bell curve, like you've alluded to the top end. Yeah, we do. But that's an issue in the system, you know? And that's an issue that teachers have got to be really aware of. Yeah. The other thing I often get asked about is why the focus on reading, writing, mathematics. Well, you know, and it's just reading, writing, mathematics. Well, no, because we get this growth and progress issue in almost every curriculum area. Well, actually, every curriculum area that we've looked at to date. So, and I'm just going to give you a few. So this is science. This is the National Monitoring Study, Knowledge and Communication of Science Ideas and Nature of Science. This blue curve here is year 4, and the yellow is year 8, okay? So by year 4, students should be at about curriculum level 2 in science, yeah? And they pretty much are. That's about, you know, develop level 1 and 2, they're into level 2. But by year 8, they should be well into curriculum level 3, into curriculum level 4 in science, yeah? By year 8? Year 8? Level 4? No, nowhere near it. And so this is our kind of national profile. They're about emerging level 3 in science. So can you see here, this is year 4, this is year 8. So we've had 4 years of learning supposedly as a nation in science, and we are not seeing a 4 years worth of learning. And science. It's the same in writing. It's the same in maths and stats. And it's the same in health and PE. So what's going on is kids are getting there by year 4, but you know this point, we've got fewer and fewer kids making a year's growth from year 5 onwards. And the whole thing compounds. You know, if you think of it as a system, the whole thing is compounding year on year. All right. Having said that, this is more positive news. So I'm going to take you now into NCEA and what the profile of NCEA looks like. So, and I'm going to do it by school leavers and then age 18. So, remember I said about 60,000 students in any one year group, so these are our school leavers. And in 2009 there was about 59,000 of them, and in 2013 it's about 63,000 of them, roughly. Just a few things here that I want you to look at. So in 2009, of our school leaving cohort, we had 67% of our school leaving cohort attaining our national qualification. So, you know, I don't think it's that flash really. So 67% of our school leaving cohort leaving with our national qual. By 2013, we're up to 74% of our school leavers getting NCEA level 2. And I can tell you in 2014, it's gone up to about 77%. So in the intervening years, between 2009 and 2013, something different happened in our education system to enable those kids to get NCEA level 2. Now, they aren't different kids, you know, and they didn't experience a qualitatively different education system prior to coming into secondary. Something different happened. Who are the secondary schools here? Hands up the secondary schools. Okay, right. Yeah, something really different happened in secondary for these kids. And so when I'm looking at the data, my question is, what? So I fundamentally believe that most of our what works for who and how much is already in our schools. You know this. But we've got a real problem with the dissemination and the discussion around professional practice and what works. It's locked up in every individual school. And it's not till you start to get data like this that you think, how on earth did we do that? I get principals phone me now and they'll say, can you, like I'm this type of school, can you give me a school that's comparable to me, that looks a bit like me, that has better results than me? So they can phone them up, they'll phone them up and say, one, do I believe your results, first of all? Secondly, if I've established that actually your results are true, then I want to know what you're doing. And we've got to get smart about that because the answer is in our schools. Anyway, the other thing is, so if you look at the pass rate for Māori in 2009, so less than half of the Māori population, school level population, walked out with NCA level 2, and for Pacifica, 56%. So now look at it, right? So this is a thing that we've struggled with for years and years in terms of the inequity. In 2013, we've now got an additional 10% of Māori school leavers leaving with NCA level 2. It's gone up to, I think it's over 60% now. And for Pacifica, 67% are leaving with NCA level 2, and it's gone up to over 70%. So not only are we getting growth in our national population, we are getting growth at a faster rate for the Māori and Pacifica population. That's an incredible feat. We're starting to address the inequity issue. The thing is, most of the profession don't know that we're doing it, and we haven't got a shared common understanding as to how we're doing it across all the schools. When you start to break it down as to how many kids does that make, so how many kids has that made a difference to? How many more kids? Because we count them, because we're counting the Ministry of Finance long-term forward liability. So, that 1989 born cohort, the cohorts that are coming through education now are significantly different. And we will reduce that long-term forward liability on the basis of these statistics. We have far less people going into benefit. Anyway, so how many kids are we talking about? So school leavers, we had, you can see. So it's gone from 2009 to 2013, an increase of 7 percentage points. So it's an additional 7,000 leavers now with NCA level 2. For Catholic schools, again we break down just for your particular school, so you've had a 6.2 percentage point increase, so you've had 543 additional students leaving NCA level 2, school leavers. For Māori, across the whole, 9 percentage points, an additional 2,000. Pacifica, this is Māori for Catholic schools. Again, it's just an increase, you can see the increase, 49 kids. Pacifica nationally, so look at that, Pacifica nationally, 12 percentage point increase. On every indicator that I look at to do with anything actually, Pacifica are seeing incredible growth and progress. Retention, stand-downs, like everything. I don't know what's going on in that community, but something is. Pacifica for Catholic schools, so again, an increase, so on and so forth. Now, there are students that leave the school and for whatever reason, and they'll go on and they'll pick up NCA level 2 before they are 18. And that's the BPS goal. We're interested in what happens by the time you reach 18 years old. It's a similar picture. So we used to be at 74.3%. We're actually now, I can tell you, it's about 81%. If we wanted to reach the target today, okay, so if we just wanted to hit the BPS target of 85% of all of our population having achieved NCA level 2, then we would need an additional, basically, 2,500 kids getting NCA level 2 this year. Right, so think back to that. So we need 2,500 students, 2,500 additional students. Our cohort is 60,000, right? The 2,500 students are in roughly, about 350 schools. So 2,500 students in 350 schools, it starts to get to be very, very small, very, very small numbers. When I'm at my kids hate me going to school, assembly and things, or prize giving, because they'll talk about, we've done great this year. We've got 85% of our kids getting NCA level 2, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, Okay, Molly, so what's the size of the cohort? So you've got about 100 kids in your year group, and so, you know, so the 15 kids, so there's 15 kids that didn't walk out with NCA level 2. Who are the 15 kids? And she'll go, oh, so and so and so and so. And I'll go, why? Why didn't they, you know? And she'll go, well, that one left school, and that one did this, and that one, and, you know. And so what she does is she'll start to tell me the profile of this individual student. And what I'll get is generally two profiles. One is a student that's incredibly vulnerable and at risk, and is working like hell to get out of the education system. And then there are other students that don't necessarily have the vulnerability and the risk, but actually they're disengaged. And she knows who they are, and I would put money on the fact that most of those teachers would know the names of those individual students, and most of the teachers would have known the names of those students probably by about, you know, year 6, year 7, 5, you know. Anyway, so we're talking about, you know, 2,500 kids in about 400 schools. And if you wanted to hit it equitably, right, so this is a population-based target, but if you wanted to get 85% of Māori students and 85% of Pacifica students getting NCA level 2, which would be phenomenal, we need 2,500 Māori students and 752 additional Pacifica students. It's so incredibly doable. As a country, if we could do this, it would just, one, it would prove the fact that we can, you know, but can you imagine how much it would just alter the shape, the economic and social shape of our country? And I'm not saying that NCA level 2 is the silver bullet, right? I'm not. There are a lot of other things out there, but actually, the one thing that is the silver bullet is education. And we need to continue to invest in it. Okay, so we can give you your statistics. So in 2013, you were at 90% of your 18-year-olds having achieved NCA level 2. You've already hit the target for Catholic schools, and if you wanted to hit it equitably, like, can you imagine this if you did this? So you just need an additional 12 Māori students and 8 Pacific students. I mean, if you as a group of schools could actually meet it and fly the flag, and then start the dialogue as to how did you do it, that would be phenomenal. Okay, that's good. Right. So I'm coming to an end, and I'm just going to show you a few other things that are in the system that are kind of, that we need to know about, you know, we just need to be aware of it, and you'll know about this from your own schools. But retention is a problem. So we lose lots and lots of kids in the system through early leaving exemptions, teen pregnancies, a whole range of things. Work, the economy doesn't help us much because lots of kids are going into low-paid, low-skilled work, and we've looked at students that leave school going to the low-paid, low-skilled work, and what happens to them 5 years later. And there was one cohort we just recently looked at. There was 2,000 of them that left school early, went into work. So for MSD, they're ticking their box, you know, because they are in employment, and so they're fine. But of that 2,000 students that we looked at, 5 years later, only 700 remained in work. The majority of the rest were then on the benefit. And so they're getting these, you know, low-skilled jobs. It's not doing them any favours, but we are getting inroads into retention. So in 2009, we had about 12,000 students leaving below the age of 17, and in 2013, it's about 11,000 students. As a nation, it's a mathematical impossibility for us to meet the BPS target for the kids that are in the system, because most of the children have left the system. So our BPS cohort is the year 11s now. And so as of kind of next year, they're going to be leaving in droves. They're going to start now, and they're just going to be out. So yeah, retention's an issue. For you, so in 2009, there were 514 students that left below the age of 17, and 400 in 2013. So there's quite a lot of both progress in terms of your retention. And of course, the longer you stay in school, the more likely you are to achieve, you know, to get qualified. The other thing is, not only do you need to stay at school for as long as you possibly can, or stay in education as long as you possibly can. So as a parent, you know, just, you got to stay there, keep going. Turning up every single day and being on time is profoundly important. So, and again, you know this as teachers, but we looked at, we took the attendance survey data, and it's just the attendance survey, you know, it's got issues, but anyway, we looked at we took 1 year, and this was a group, this was an attendance survey that was run, so it was run, it was a year 8 cohort, obviously running to, and we looked at their propensity to go on and achieve their literacy and numeracy credits, level 1, level 2, so on and so forth. This is the literacy and numeracy credits, so the lowest possible thing they can get. And we looked at propensity to get credits by how much they attend and are late, right? So if, for example, you were 35 days late, and this is absenteeism these lines, if you're 35 days late and you had 20 days absenteeism in term 2 of year 8, you had less than 5% chance of getting your literacy and numeracy credits. So now you can kind of go back to schools, and you, of your year 8s in term 2, we could probably work out on the basis of their lateness and attendance their propensity to go on and get their literacy and numeracy credits. So we could do this mathematically back in the office in terms of working out kids' propensity to achieve. You probably have this at your fingertips, you'll know, like you've got a sense of, but of course we've got all these 53,000 teachers knowing stuff about kids, but they all know it individually, and so we're not as a nation kind of surfacing and making transparent some of these issues and responding to them. There's no point staying in school though if they're not achieving. So, you know, look, like that's the profile we've got. We've got lots of kids that are in fact going, but they're not getting a year's worth of learning. So you need a year's worth of learning in a year. The other thing that we are starting to look at as well is risk factors. So what are the things, you know, I was talking to you about how we could matching data sets with MSD and corrections and the like. We're starting to, I suppose, get the evidence, if you like, of what are some of the characteristics that are associated with not going on to achieve. And these are no-brainers, actually, in terms of the education sector. So things like living in a decile 10 mesh block, so that's the NZ decile 10 mesh block, so that's the inverse to our decile system, so that's really decile 1. Stand downs and suspensions, enrolled in a decile 1 school, having 5 full days of unjustified absence, you know, high rate of stand down suspensions. You can see the list. See up here as well that again, all students. This was a real cohort. They were born about 1991 or something like that. There was about 59,000 students in this cohort. And remember, we had a population projection of about 65% of the Of any one cohort of 60,000, we have about 7,000 students that are deemed to be the most vulnerable, so serious risk. And what happens is you get one risk factor, so these are by one risk factor. But when you start to get multiple risk factors and they start to compound, of course, it gets very, very severe very quickly and systemic and pervasive across the whole of that individual's life. We've started to work out the risk factors. Again, you'll know these as teachers. This is just the maths behind it. The risk factors that coalesce across education and MSD and corrections. So the standout things for us as indicators that the student may not go on, it's not destiny, but the student may not go on and achieve are these things. A primary caregiver with less than NCA level 1. It's one of the biggest risk factors. So, you know, kids with parents that have not had success in education. Particularly mothers that don't have success in education. If you've got a mum that's qualified, it's a really strong protective factor. Children of parents who receive benefit, children that have had a child using family notification, children in highly deprived areas, those in low decile schools, those that have stand-down suspensions, and so on and so forth. You know, orphans, children of sole parents. Now, these particular aspects are not, you know, this is not destiny, and what happens is these factors kind of tend to coalesce. They all come together. Another big one that isn't there is transience. So often what we get is we'll get somebody, say, we'll get a child that is there's an orphan, you know, unsupported child, looked after by the state. Child, youth and family will look after that child in terms of health and welfare, which will be the right thing to do, but often they will move that child across schools, across boundaries, and so it totally disrupts their education. And education is the single biggest protective factor. It's the single thing that will enable that child to go on and live a life whereby they can be part of the economy. So that's, you know, it's starting to get pretty focused in terms of what we can do, and so I thought I would introduce you to, this is a real life person. He isn't called Steve, but meet Steve. And with these data now, so we're able to look at an individual and track their social sector life history, if you like. So this is Steve as he grew up from age 1 all the way through to age 19. And at about 2.5, there was notification. So child youth and family were involved, and there started to be some cases of abuse for Steve, right? So as young as 2-ish, there was somebody in the social services that was involved in Steve's life. I imagine if we were to look at Steve's parents, we would, we probably have anticipated that Steve may have had some problems. So at that point, about 2, somebody in the social sector is involved in Steve's life, and they look after him, right? Then what happens is this continues on, and ultimately Steve, at about 11, has moments in care where he goes into care. These are real events. But also what's gone on is Steve goes to school, and Steve takes things like ESL, and he does his NCA credits, and a whole range of things. And Steve actually has got a few clues, so we know from Steve's education data that actually, this guy's fine, he can achieve, he's fine. Then what happens to Steve is, so that's education involved there. Then he goes into youth justice, so he's starting to get the justice sector involved. And then ultimately, Steve goes on to income support. So what this picture shows me is way back early on in Steve's life, we would have had some indication that Steve may hit some strife at some point. And for all of the children now that are in the enroll system, so enrollees, so now that the kids, enrolled in schools, we can go through those students and we can work out the kids that are likely to have this kind of profile, or have this profile, in fact. And what we know is that multiple agencies have been involved with Steve, and multiple agencies have been looking after particular parts of Steve. So they've been looking after health and welfare, or care, or education. But there hasn't been one person responsible in the social sector responsible for looking after the whole of Steve. Nobody's looking after Steve. They're just looking after the parts, the arms, the legs, or the bits. Also, what happens is, so we can tell early that Steve's going to hit some strife. We've got multiple people involved, but no one person accountable. And also, this is the cumulative total that's been kind of not paid to see, but used by the social services in order to administer an external intervention, if you like. So it goes from 6,000 all the way up to about 142,000 by the time Steve is 19. So Steve's likely profile, now that he's on income support, he'll be one of those $80 million kids, and so by the time Steve finishes his life, that's an awful lot of money that's been kind of paid to Steve in the social sector pipeline. Now, my point to the Minister of Finance is, this is really wasted money. The money that we can now predict that we will spend on Steve should be spent back here. So we should be moving our dollars around. So you remember I started and I said the 3 big spenders in the budget are health, MSD, and education. MSD's budget is twice the budget of education. And so what I'm arguing for, Ministry of Social Development. Yeah, sorry. So they have a budget that is twice, roughly, that of education. And so what I'm wanting to do, essentially, is to shift the weight of the budget. The investment needs to go into the front end of Steve. The investment needs to be going here. Needs to be going into early childhood. And we need to identify Steve early and invest. Lots of people find this a little bit difficult because of the privacy issues, you know, and some of the constraints and barriers. But I think, given that we can do this kind of stuff, we've got the opportunity to start to maybe change some life course events for people.
Would that be because if you did it now, you still have to be spending that money at the time?
Yes.
That's
right.
What I meant, and that's why the money
Yeah. That's exactly right. So you'll hear about, I don't know, you know, if you're looking like you read the politics, but you'll hear about the Minister of Finance talk about the investment-based approach, or the population-based approach. And what he's talking about is this. So he's basically challenged us to reduce his long-term forward liability in terms of benefit and correction spend, and find for him where in the system we should be investing. And of course, you've got education officials like me saying you've got to invest in education. But also, the data tells us we should invest in education. Education is the biggest protective factor that we have. It's the one thing that can stop Steve on this particular trajectory. But the problem we've got as well is not only is the cost loaded down the kind of later end of the life spectrum, we have this situation whereby we don't work across ourselves as effectively as we might. So, for example, child, youth and family people will be looking after Steve and his health and his welfare and safety, which is the right thing to do. But what they'll do is they'll find another household for Steve, but that means he has to move school. And so you've got areas like Gisborne, for example, where the rates of transition, I think it's about, I don't know, it's over 20 in every 1,000 kids moving. And these kids in Gisborne, is anybody here from Gisborne? Okay. So one of the highest rates of transients in Gisborne, and so we've basically got a whole lot of kids not even moving across New Zealand, they're moving within the Gisborne region. And every single one of those transitions, you know, kids quite easily could have 2 or 3 transitions, you know, from school to school to school in any one year. And every one of those transitions is, well, basically compounding the risk. And then we're doing the right thing by MSD, but we're not doing the right thing overall by Steve. So, I'm just going to summarise now. Oh, before I do that, the other thing we can do now is work out, because we've got this profile, we can work out what works. And we can work out the programs that we're putting into the education system and whether they do have any material impact. So the things that we're seeing are working are trades academies. It's having quite a significant impact in terms of the profile of some of these kids, but they're taking from the kind of medium risk bracket. Art, so the Achievement Retention Transition Program is working. Things that work less well, although they take from a higher risk group, are the service academies. So the service academies like the army-based 6-week training that students can go on to if they go into the welfare. And we have very, very few interventions for the most vulnerable children. In fact, I struggle to name one. So, yeah.
Would Steve's situation look the same in a state school and Catholic school? I'm just interested as to whether the picture, are you able to determine those?
We could look at that. So we could look at different Steves and different schools. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you may have a higher risk profile. You know, it might be, yeah, it might be that you are, yeah, you could have a higher risk profile than the general population. Maybe, I don't know, we'd have to go and look at that.
I suppose it is if you don't put money in, because Steve's Steve,
Yeah.
and the problem is Steve wants to create with societal dysfunction.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Steve can't control that, that's his family environment.
That's right.
So even to put Steve to ECB isn't trying nothing really.
That's exactly right.
It's all of those problems.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is a cycle of
That's
dysfunction.
exactly right. Yeah. And remember that one, remember I said one of the biggest risk factors was a parent without a qualification.
Absolutely.
You know? And that's not because, you know, that is because that is an indicator of that dysfunction. The one thing that has the most certainty and strength in terms of propensity not achieving. So does that make sense? So there's a whole range of things that impact on kids being able to achieve or not. The thing that is the most strongest and certain in terms of making a poor life course trajectory almost destiny is maternal education status. So if mum hasn't got a qual, it's almost certain that that child will not go on and achieve. And that's, that's got a lot to do with that cycle of dysfunction, that intergenerational risk. But also, the flip side is when you start to look at the best evidence synthesis program, and the best evidence synthesis is saying one of the biggest factors is educationally powerful connections. It starts to kind of give you a sense of the power of the parent. If parents are not engaged, it's a bad thing. But getting parents engaged and having high expectations for children has a profound impact. And of course, that came through the base.
Then you have the other side of that, and this is a very loaded political statement. How is Steve going to be helped by making his mother go to work so that he comes home and there's no one home? She's a solo parent, she's got other children. And I think we lose that holistic look at what it means to look after the person. There's so many agencies involved there. And if the mum hasn't got qualifications, she's going to be going out to rotate work and she's going to be struggling to be home for Steve to keep him out of the trouble he's getting into.
Yeah.
We don't seem to be taking that sort of logic into account when we count our dollars.
Yeah. So, that's kind of obviously the budget announcements and stuff. But you see, what we see is, and one of the other risk factors was a parent on a benefit. And so we see in the data, if you start to go onto a benefit early, you remain on a benefit. And if you remain on a benefit, there are a number of negative implications of being on the benefit, as well as the financial issue. So what's going on in Mr. Finance's mind is he wants people off the welfare. He wants people off the welfare because obviously we want to reduce the spend. But actually, regardless of the reduction of spend, we know that if parents are off the benefit, they end up with far more life choice and far more positive engagement in the community, as well as more money. Now, there's a trade-off there, isn't there, in terms of quality time at home with the kids, and that's always a difficult thing. But at the same time, it might be that if that mum, or and I'm not making a value judgment here, but it may be in that particular family circumstance, if mum is in work or dad is in work, and that child goes into ECE, if they're going into ECE, that is quality provision, and they're going in there regularly and for enough time, they could get a really strong, solid platform in terms of their education foundation. So there is no silver bullet, and there are lots and lots of variables, but that's where the government's heading. That's where they're thinking. Yeah.
When you look at the risk factors and the propensity to achieve, those ones that you showed us, a lot of those are outside of the school.
Yes.
And you mentioned, looking at Steve here, the number of agencies that are involved, and you touched on the point of that they change along the way. And we all have children in our school who've been involved with lots of agencies, costing lots of money to have meetings for family group conferences, etc. Has there been any talk with MSD or the ministry about having a person allocated that when these indicators are picked up before they start school, this particular person in MSD or MOE or wherever is going to walk alongside that child or that family?
Yes, like lots of talk about that, because we know again from the evidence, education is the biggest protective factor, right, we have, and the student might not have a caregiver involved in education, and they may be lucky enough to strike a great teacher. What we're wanting to do is basically put in place champions or mentors for kids, because we know if students have one powerful, educationally powerful connection, it makes a great difference to them. So just at the moment, we've got a pilot that's starting, it was announced in the budget, called Year 9 Plus. It's starting at Year 9, unfortunately. We've got a stock and flow problem. We've got all these kids coming up, and we've got the ones in the system now. We're basically doing just that. So there's between 80 and 100 kids champions in Gisborne. Gisborne is our highest risk area, along with Northland, that will essentially get those mentors, they'll get those champions.
And they have to be well paid, they have to be well qualified and well paid.
Yeah, I don't know how much they're being paid, but yeah, no, they do. They've got to be amazing. Yeah. There was one more question. No? That's it, pretty much.
I've looked at that quote. Leaving aside Auckland, have you got any general comments to make about what's happening in the population? It feels like it's starting to sink, but I'm not sure.
Sink in terms of numbers. No, it's not. No. It's always about, it's bumpy, you know, kind of goes between 58 and 52. We did have, it was lumpy earlier on, but no, it's going to be around about 60,000. The profile of the population will change, of course. So there will be an increase of, in terms of Maori Pacific people, and we're seeing more and more migrants. But yeah, no.
What I'm getting at is Auckland is a case. Some of what's happening, is there any view of what's happening in the rest of the country in terms of that?
Yes. Queensland's Queensland's going through, Queenstown is going through the roof. So Auckland is an issue, but Queenstown is also going to be an issue because high growth in terms of population density.
And the rest of us will be declining?
It's kind of patchy. Yeah, no, nothing sticks out in my mind. Definitely Queenstown and Auckland. I'd have to look at each regional. Yeah, each regional profile.
Quite nice as part of that fortnightly bulletin for a bit of an overview population.
Oh yeah, sure.
A lot of us have to try and predict the role
Yeah.
of things. So Auckland seems instead of like shadowing what's happening in the rest of the country.
Yeah, I think that's true actually. So there is a handout, so you can get the slides. There's there's an A3 that I've put together on the basis of a lot of this information, and also my card. I'll leave it at the back of the room. If people have any questions, then do ask me. Yeah, just ask me. All the stuff that I've got this from is basically your data, and my job is to enable you to get the data back in a way that makes sense to you. We have a massive data engine back at the ministry, and it's ultimately Crown SA, it's yours. Yeah.
Special needs children coming to your data, like they're never going to make international standards and achieve at the level that they need to. So how is your data take that into account?
Oh yeah, so we have there's kind of various ways we do actually have quite a lot of information on special needs students in terms of their qualifications and their trajectories. Maybe email me and I can send it to you.
My instructions say we have to finish on time. Just thank you very much, Lisa. That data that you presented, it's fascinating, and I think the discussions and the debate that fall out of it are more fascinating. But thank you for the work that you're doing, because hopefully it's bringing more cohesion to solutions. And one of the take-homes for me will be that the vulnerable child, the Steve, if we don't look after our most vulnerable and relate to them in fine ways, that kind of coordinated way that we talked about, Andy, there are solutions in there somewhere. And we hope that collectively we will find them. But thank you very much for the work that you're doing on behalf of Lisa, and thank you everybody.